All right, good to go.
All right. Well, so this week we read about leadership growth development and then also crisis communication. We also had the video that we were going to watch, but before we jump into the discussion on the video, let's just go off of one of the prompts here, and really that's to talk about crisis communication and how we see it, maybe some experiences if you guys have ever gone through that working with the large corporations that you ladies are a part of.
Well, I can start with a little bit of my experience with crisis communication. I've had some, I think what I continue to come back to is with my experience with the times that Starbucks has had to go through with labor cuts and really some challenges that we've had financially as a company. What I took away from the chapter was how they define crisis as being like a major unpredictable event that threatens the corporation or the organization. And that can be like external factors, internal factors, physical events, weather, things like that. Sometimes I do think, like, the thing that I had a hard time reconciling with that is that there are sometimes predictable events that come with it that the companies don't necessarily take the time to either address or recognize as coming. They either ignore it or they don't want to deal with it. And so that's kind of been my experience sometimes, is that they'll either go through the unpredictable event, in my experience with like the housing market crash and then the resulting labor cuts we had to go through with that, and the store closures, layoffs, things like that, especially with a big corporation like Starbucks. That was really hard for us. And I imagine it was harder for small businesses as well. But then also, I feel like we've been really cautious ever since. And I don't know how healthy that is necessarily. But I definitely think it's an interesting thing to look at in retrospect.
Well, I think with what you were saying, kind of how Starbucks has maintained this cautious level of maintaining maybe their budgeting, the way that you guys are handling things, so to prevent further crises, which actually something about when we were watching that movie on BP, basically they were falling into those safety zones. So things were going well, they were ignoring things, and then they would have another big crisis, which, you know, in the chapter you read that that's what happens is you get comfortable, you let your guard down, you cut costs and you take money away from different areas, and then things happen. So I think that's probably smart in Starbucks experience to learn from it and then maintain what they're doing. So
yeah, and I do agree with part of that. I think in the customer service industry, it can be challenging because, at least what I've experienced recently, is that we're still continuing to cut and cut and cut, but we don't need to right now. And our customer service is suffering because of it. So that's where I'm having trouble reconciling with it, I guess, is that I don't understand the rationale between why we're running so lean when we're posting. And I know I've talked about that a lot, but that's my experience that I've had when we're posting record sales. So I totally understand wanting to be conscious about stuff, but I also have a hard time making the connections in my brain with having your experience as a customer suffer because the company's too concerned about labor, if that makes sense. So I think it's a very fine line that that corporations have to walk. I think it can definitely be a challenge, I would imagine, as like upper management trying to make that balance. But it is important, like you said, like with what we watched, to not ignore it and to not get comfortable. I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so I've had a little experience. The healthcare corporation that I work for, at the end of last year, announced that we were at risk of being bought out or merging with another large corporation. And I think before the panic set in for the employees, I think that it was really commendable of senior leadership to be vocal and to share, you know, as much as they could with us or with the rest of the employees and staff, because once the information was, came out publicly, we actually had meetings where they shared the information with the employees first. Although I'm sure, there were other people that knew about it before we did, but I think it really, really helped to share the information, or as much information as they could, with the staff to limit just that panic that essentially could have set in with the employees. They did close a couple of facilities, and it seemed as though they, I think it seemed like they actually did some homework, and they were smart in closing maybe some of the smaller centers that would impact, the fewer, least amount of employees. And I think that really helped as well. So they kind of did their homework and kept us, up to date and with everything as much as they could.
Well, that's good to hear your example of it, leadership, I guess, handling it well and communicating just to avoid some of that crisis and damage control. That's good. I personally, I don't really have any experience of going through any type of corporate level crisis situation like that. The only thing that I can relate to is maybe in some, like when I was in the military, we used to do active shooter drills. So essentially you would have like a crisis management team, and you would have crisis procedures. And so we would do these active drills, and everybody had a place, and everybody had a function in that place. And there were certain systems that we had to follow, and those were things that we did on a regular basis. So just keeping up with training in the event of a real crisis or something, to take place on base. That's really my only experience still to some of the chapter readings, but so I guess to dive into, let me see what the question was. I forgot. Hold on, sorry. I guess just what communication issues did you see faced by BP in the spill that we watched in that movie? So any communication issues? For me, I don't know that I see it as failure to communicate. I think it was just a lack of judgment to ignore these things, to cut costs and put lives at risk that way. But I don't know, what is your guys' take on that as far as the question failure to communicate?
Yeah, I think that they, one of the biggest mistakes that they made initially was they didn't take enough time to assess the situation to be able to communicate. I think had they taken time to assess the situation, they would have been able to communicate what they should have communicated ultimately.
Yeah, but in watching a lot of that, though, things were communicated back to their corporate center in England, and ultimately a lot of it was just ignored.
Yeah, I think that was another mistake that they made. I think they, they acted promptly and like you said, somewhat hurriedly, and didn't pay attention to ultimately the things that, harmed people.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that too. Like I was actually pretty shocked to learn that they took over such a giant facility and then continually ignored all of the safety concerns and all of the communication that they received from even hiring a plant manager who specialized in that work. And as much as he continued to communicate, like you mentioned, Kellyanne, the problems that they were having and all of the issues that were coming up, like it's just shocking to me to have lives at risk and then have so many people die when they made over $1 billion payout, I think they said, when they could have just spent not even near that much just to improve the facility. And just to listen to management on the ground is just baffling to me, why you wouldn't put the money in to make the workplace safer for people. And the theme that I saw that kept coming up is how much BP was so focused on expansion and focused on being a global competitor, and that they continued to just place people so much lower than profitability. Like their profitability was their number one concern. And I think that was the major theme, at least that I picked up, that they just were so concerned about making money, and they were so much less concerned about the safety of their people and the environment ultimately as well.
Yeah, I agree they didn't seem to take ownership of any of the problems.
Agreed. Where are we at on time?
We are at 10 minutes and 13 seconds.
We did it again.
Great. Good job.
So I actually really enjoyed watching that dive like that. It's always boggling to me to just understand how businesses can run this way. So, and then there's a movie, obviously that story, which I've yet to see, but I know that I wanted to. So I'll make sure to do that. Anywho.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I hadn't realized, like, I mean, I remember seeing and reading about the Gulf spill, but I don't really remember hearing about the one that had happened at their big plant. I think probably because it was so much earlier in the 90s. And it just blows my mind that you would not handle that as an organization so much better when it's so dangerous for people. It was really interesting to learn about how it just impacted so many lives and wildlife and environments like that, and just kind of sad too when it could have been prevented.
Yeah, well, what was so cool is that in all these, because actually it was on a span of like almost every 3 to 5 years, these situations were happening and people were dying. But the company would pay people out to not talk negatively about BP, even though like the one guy was in a coma for 6 weeks and he took this payout. And that just is a lot, that they truly were hiding things and not even caring about fixing the issues at hand, just moving forward to hope it didn't happen again. So yeah, it was crazy. I liked it.
Yeah, I definitely admired that woman who didn't take the payout right away on her parents dying and demanded that they released all those documents that kind of spurred that first federal investigation. I thought that was really great of her to just say, you know, I don't want your money. I want to figure out like what's going on with your company that caused this. So it's good that they had people who weren't afraid to say something working for them at least.
Yeah. All right, girls. Well, thanks for your conversation this week. I think this is our last one, actually.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was really great working with you ladies. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you both very much for everything.
Well, thank you guys and enjoy the week and happy fall break, I guess, winter break.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and I'll get this posted.
All right. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.